Hello there. I am joined by Ben from West Michigan Transformers, and today we have an Ent deck, which should be pretty cool. Ents rock. So, Ben, also, everybody should check out Ben's stuff for more long form Lord of the Rings TCG. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But let's get right into it. So, Ben, what am I looking at here?
So this is a Towers block deck, specifically allowing series 1 through 6, so you can dip into Fellowship block as well. But we have an Ent deck here. I've been watching a lot of videos on your channel, and recently, I believe it was Andy Talaga came on and did a really cool Gandalf aggro burn through the sight path deck with a lot of choke, and then it had this awesome Moria Swarm. This deck is like completely the opposite philosophy, 100%. So in first block, choke is always a really strong strategy, and the free people's really focused on it. In the two towers, the attitude shifts, and you get a lot of cards that really encourage you to like blow up the Twilight Pool. And no one does it better than the Ents. So I'm going to go through the cards here sort of one by one, but just really quick. You can see our starting fellowship there is Quickbeam. We have Frodo, Courteous Halfling, Merry, Friend of Sam, and then Pippin, Hobbit of some intelligence. The thought here is we are going to play as many companions as we possibly can. So Frodo has an ability which keys off spotting at least 3 unbound companions. We meet that requirement right away in the starting fellowship. And then in Towers format, if you're going to go with an Ent deck, generally the strongest choice is to use Quickbeam at the beginning because he doesn't have any limitations to when he can skirmish, and he has nice solid stats. And with Merry and Pippin in the starting fellowship, he is Twilight reduced down to 2. If you're going to run Ents, the most powerful way is to make sure that you do rely on the Unbound Hobbits. So we have Merry and Pippin here, and the Ents generally take a huge toll on the Unbound Hobbit's vitality by, say, exerting Treebeard to allowing one of the Unbound... Sorry. If you exert one of the Unbound Hobbits, it lets Treebeard skirmish. Or if you see Lindenroot down there, he says exert an Unbound Hobbit or discard 2 cards from hand to allow Lindenroot to skirmish. If we're running like Ent Moots or anything like that, you have to exert. So it takes a lot to get the Ents going. It takes it out of their vitality. I have really gone that direction specifically and given ourselves ways to refresh the vitality of the Unbound Hobbits. And for that reason, I've also given Merry an ability, chosen a Merry with an ability that takes a lot of vitality as it is. So we have Merry, Friend of Sam, and if Merry is not assigned to a skirmish, exert him twice to add his strength to another companion. So the idea here is that we're going to flood the Twilight Pool. We're going to fill our fellowship up with as many Ents as we can. And then Merry is going to be a skirmish engine. You can see there are 4 Hobbit Swords in the deck, and that will add to Merry's strength. But I said I'd go card by card. So here I go. There's our starting fellowship. The last thing is Pippin. He can remove a burden or wound when you play him. The idea is we want to go first, so bid somewhat high and at least let Pippin take one of the burdens away. There's a good chance that you can get going on the sight path really quickly. Okay, to the right of Pippin, you'll see 4 copies of Boomed and Trumpeted. This is a skirmish event that can give Ents not only a strength pump, but a damage bonus. And one of the most important things for a free people's side to do is to be able to take minions off the table. So that damage bonus is super important. And then we have Hobbit Appetite, and I'm running 4 copies because, again, our Unbound Hobbits are going to be exerting a lot, especially Merry. So if Merry runs up like his full tab during one of your turns and he's exhausted, on the next turn you can play a Hobbit Appetite. It will cost 3, but we're already flooding the Twilight Pool. We'll see if the opponent's hand can keep up, and we'll just heal Merry all the way. Then we have 4 copies of There and Back Again, which will give Frodo, Merry, and Pippin, and Sam, if he's out there, strength bonus. That will add on to what Merry can give to the Ents while they're fighting as well. And it's good shielding for Frodo if he has to get into skirmishes. On that note, I didn't talk about our ring, but just really quickly, the answer to all the riddles gives Frodo an optional strength bonus by adding a burden, so he can become strength 5 even without a sword. But again, we're running 4 Hobbit Swords and 4 copies of There and Back Again. So just by focusing on getting our Unbound Hobbits strong enough, we're also giving Frodo the protection he needs. Then we have 4 copies of Stout and Sturdy, and I really do love this card in the deck. It says, maneuver or skirmish, heal a Hobbit. What we're doing is using these for Merry, again, very specifically. So during the skirmish phase, he exerts twice. He adds his strength to another companion. In most circumstances, he wouldn't be able to go again. But if you play a Stout and Sturdy during the skirmish phase, you can heal 1 off of Merry, and then you can go again with Merry and take Treebeard from strength 12 to strength 17 to strength, 22. So things get absurd. Then we have 1 copy of Sam just to increase, our ability to bid high and go first. Hopefully we draw into him. And if our opponent is running burden adding, it's good to have an answer for that. Okay, I have 3 copies of Skinbark and 4 copies of Treebeard and a copy of Lindenroot and A Wizard Is Never Late. All because, well, I mean, there are many reasons, but down below you see the host of Fangorn and Ent Horde, and they both have a cultural reinforcement where you have to spot 2 Ent companions to play them. So I'm having as many copies of like the non-restricted Ents as I can, so I can just throw them in. Well, I do only have 3 of Skinbark, but anyways. So with 4 of Treebeard, 3 of Skinbark, Lindenroot, and A Wizard Is Never Late, and then Quickbeam already being on the table at the beginning, we are very rarely going to run into any trouble actually playing the host of Fangorn and the Ent Horde. And then, I mean, Treebeard has fantastic stats. He has a base of 12 strength. The host of Fangorn has 10. The Ent Horde has 10. Lindenroot has 10. Even Skinbark has 8, just as a base. And then we have a few other things. You see Crack into Rubble. Exert 2 Ents to liberate a site and discard a condition, just in case we need it. And then Escape, if we play it on Merry, then even without the Stout and Sturdy, he can already exert twice. And then on the next turn, you can add 4 with Hobbit Appetite and just bring him all the way back down. Really quickly, the general strategy with this deck, as we said, is bidding relatively high, hoping to go first. You want Treebeard out there as quickly as possible because he's your best fighter and because he has an ability which says exert Treebeard to make an Ent damage +1. Again, we need to clear minions off of the table, and basically Boomed and Trumpeted and Treebeard's ability until you get to Reflections. As far as I know, those are the only 2 abilities that give Ents any damage bonus. So we just really want those as soon as we can get them. And then having 4 copies of Treebeard, because he's tapping into his own vitality to make himself or other Ents damage +1, we can then use the redundant copies of Treebeard to heal him on the next turn. Now, it is very true that most minion sides have answers for large fellowships like Uleri Enkea or like a Saldron, Assassin. I'm not saying that right. But minions who target large fellowships. This fellowship is unapologetic. The idea is we're going to play. We are not holding anything back. And let's see if anything stops us. On that note, the most important companion in this deck by far, well, is Frodo because he has the ring. Okay, the most important companion by far except Frodo is Merry, because he is, for one thing, an Unbound Hobbit, allowing the Ents to fight. But for another, he's the skirmish engine, allowing Ents to go from strong to broken. So if Enkea comes on the board, our opponent may want to target Merry first, but we have 3 copies of Skinbark, and he can exert at any time to prevent a wound to an Unbound Hobbit. We also have 4 copies of Stout and Sturdy, so it can also be played during the maneuver phase. If Enkea is targeting Merry during the maneuver phase, we can either protect with Skinbark, or we control our opponent, let them exert twice, bring Merry to the tipping point, and then play Stout and Sturdy and heal him once and make them choose where to put the last wound, having wasted the other two. Lots of good options. If they go for the other ents, they may. They do have lots of vitality, though, so that's hard. So, yeah, this is a steamroller deck. We want to play as much as we can, stomp on minions, use our damage bonuses, abuse Mary's strength pumping ability, and just walk our way to Site 9. All right, let's look at our minion side. So here we have Warg Riders. And I will admit, this is a more recent iteration of the Shadow side than I have had the chance to play yet. But typically, I have run the Warg Riders with this Ent deck so far. So most of the principles should be the same. We have 4 Warg Scout Troops, or Isengard. Here, I can pull it up over here. Yeah, Isengard Scout Troops. They are small, but they do have 3 vitality, and their ability to control sites if any orc wins the skirmish is going to be very helpful for later. We have Warg-Masters who can play wargs from our discard pile. Recursion is very important. 2 copies of Sharku. He's just good because he has a base of 7 strength for only costing 2. We have 4 copies of Isengard Flankers, who are on the same principle. 4 copies of the Isengard Rider, who can get very strong very quick. For 3 Twilight, he has a base of 8. I remember, anecdotally, a game in my early playing where I had Arwen and Legolas in my Free People's side. My brother Jake played an Isengard Rider with a War-Warg, and I thought I was safe because I had Greenleaf, but here's this fierce minion with 12, with 5 vitality, and Arwen and Legolas died on the first turn. You gotta watch out. Okay, then I'm putting in 2 Orc Commanders. They can't have the wargs underneath them, but they make each other Orc Strength +1, and then during the regroup phase, they can exert to make the Free People's player wound a companion. Wounding is really the long game of this deck. We have 3 copies of Foul Horde. As they get more vitality, they get stronger abilities. These are one of our best skirmishers in the deck because as long as they have 4 vitality with a warg, they're damage +1. I have 1 copy of Isengard Plodder. If I can get him out there, it can be great, especially if we know our opponent isn't moving on anymore, to then double down during the regroup phase and just throw away our orcs because they're going anyways, and splash wounds onto companions. Then, of course, because we have Warg Riders, I have 3 copies of just the basic Warg, 2 copies of War-Warg, and then 1 of Sharku's Warg. If we can draw Sharku's Warg or bring it from the discard pile with Warg-Master and put it on Sharku, then he gets a damage bonus. That's great. It can go on any other Warg Rider, though, so it's still a good vitality and strength pump. And then 4 Isengard Axes, which just cost 0 and add 1. So that's great for Twilight management. And then you have a permanent strength bonus. And then the Warg Riders have their own special skirmish event called Wolf Voices, which lets you become strength +2 and heal if mounted. It does cost 1, though. I'm going to try to run Servants of Saruman because it has 0 Twilight cost. It can apply to, all the Isengard orcs. And it has an option for becoming strength +3 instead of strength +2. So that feels about right to me. We'll see how that goes. But it's good to have events in the deck just to turn the tables. You have to keep your opponent's ring bearer guessing. The wargs have the ability to shut down Free People's special abilities by exerting the orc who's riding. So that can get rid of a lot of nasty abilities on the Free People's side. And then I have 1 copy of, this is Wolves of Isengard, I think. And it goes on a plain site you control. Regroup, exert an Isengard orc to make the Free People's player wounded companion. So, long game, if we can get just 1 plain site controlled using Isengard Scout Troops ability, we throw down Wolves of Isengard onto it whenever we draw into it. It's okay if that's late in the game. All we need is 1, and then we can start putting the pressure on. But otherwise, the wargs, the warg riders have a really good basic ability in that they're fierce as long as they're not exhausted. So even if you aren't drawing into the wargs right away, and certainly not every orc is going to have the chance to have a warg, they're still going to stack on wounds as long as they're not losing skirmishes because they get to fight twice. But the wargs certainly help in helping them win and getting to that second fight. So the long goal here is stack wounds with fierce skirmishes and regroup phase wounding. And then by site 9, it's a real problem. Okay, so there are our Warg Riders. A last thought on this. There's a particular Saruman who I was running for a while who keys off of Isengard Orcs. But he costs 4, he doesn't get to skirmish. And then his ability is simply to play possessions from the discard pile. It doesn't feel right to me because the wargs themselves as possessions are already so expensive. So we're paying just for the chance to play expensive things from the discard pile. I don't know. And then we have Warg-Masters who, for free, will play a warg for you as it is. Unless you can get Saruman's staff on him, it doesn't work great. And Saruman's staff specifically is an artifact. So you need a different Saruman who can specifically pull Saruman's staff from the discard pile to let that happen. So I don't think he quite fits here.
Cool.
Okay, let's look at our sites.
All right.
So going over here, I'm starting with Plains of Rohan. We're going first, but there's not a key companion besides Treebeard in the deck that we're looking specifically to pull. There's a site 2 who pulls Treebeard, but we're not trying to stop on site 2. But importantly, the Plains of Rohan is a plain site. So as long as we can control just one site, then we can throw down Wolves of Isengard onto it and hopefully start stacking wounds during the regroup phase, even if it's late game. For similar reasons, Wold of Rohan is plains. If our opponent goes first, they're getting to play their own site 1, and that will be as it may be. But we get to play site 2. So now, as soon as possible, again, hopefully we can get a plain site controlled. You have to control sites in order, like 1, 2. So that's his life. And then 3, it is another plain site, so a little more redundancy, and it gives us a Twilight. So that's helpful for a relatively expensive shadow side. On that note, Wold of Rohan also adds 1 every time the Free People's player assigns a companion or ally to a skirmish, and it costs 3, which is great. Because the Warg Riders are fierce, or should be fierce, they will add hopefully multiple amounts of Twilight throughout the turn, which can build into, okay, is my opponent moving on to site 3, and is there a lot left in the Twilight pool? Then the White Rocks, the shadow number of the site is +1 for each mounted companion. We're adding Twilight. Hornburg Parapet, there aren't a lot of great site 5s for like the Isengard Orcs, nor specifically for the Ents. But this does have 8 Twilight, so it gives us plenty of shadow to work with. And as it is, the Warg Riders have plenty of vitality, so they're not very much threatened by giving our Fellowship another archery. And it's nice to give the Ents an extra wound out there to throw, helping get rid of minions on the table. Hornburg Armory, again, there aren't a lot of like WoW site 6s in towers. This is the one that seems to hamper this deck the least. And at least if I play like Hobbit Swords, I can draw a card with it. Then the Cavern Entrance. I'm running with this instead of off to the side you see the Hornburg Causeway, which would be brutal and would key in really well with the wargs stacking wounds. The minion archery total is +2 for each unbound companion over 3. The problem is our deck is running so many Ents. They are all unbound. Hopefully we have 9 on the table. And I'm not trying to take 10 archery during the archery phase, even though if we are playing site 7, it means our opponent is moving ahead of us. It's just too much of a hazard. But Cavern Entrance is a really nice surprise. We don't have more than just the 2 skirmish events on the shadow side. So shutting down the Free People side ability to run into those like skirmish events and abilities, that's nice. and it has 7 Twilight, so there we go. Valley of Saruman costs 8, discards all allies. There are no allies in this deck, so we don't have to worry about getting hurt by that, but it can shut down a lot of really strong mechanics on our opponent's side of the table. So that's a really good one. And then Palantir Chamber, I think, is like the strongest Sight 9 that I'm aware of in the game. So you can remove 2 burdens to play a minion from your discard pile. You see off to the side there to the Caverns of Isengard, which I've run with this deck before, and it's specifically designed for Isengard orcs. The theory is that with that site, the Fellowship doesn't, your opponent's Fellowship doesn't win unless they've survived the regroup phase, when your minions are throwing out regroup phase wounding, which is what Isengard orcs love to do. And that's powerful, but the Palantir Chamber is even more powerful. And it alleviates problems if you have an empty hand. So we can remove 2 burdens to play a minion from the discard pile. If our opponent has been shielding their ring bearer, losing skirmishes by putting on the ring, this is our time to capitalize on that. And a lot of the Isengard orcs are just 2 Twilight. So there's a good chance with 9 Twilight out there and with extended like discard pile recursion that we can get a strong swarm on Sight 9. The Palantir Chamber is just a really, really powerful site. It's fantastic. So there's our deck. That's about all I have to say on it.
Yeah, very cool, Ben. So we will leave a list of this deck in the deck in the video description. So if folks want to make it, they can grab that. So this is a fun deck. I like the really big mechanics with the Ents, and then sort of using Warg Riders. It's interesting. I might build this myself and tinker around with it. So feel free to leave comments, thoughts, improvements in the comments. We'd love to hear some feedback. Ben, thanks as always for tuning in. Any final thoughts here?
Just one that you made me think of there. This is the last thing. Yes, the Ents put out a bunch of Twilight. That lets your opponent play a lot of cards, which allows them to cycle through their deck really well, unfortunately. But A, I want my opponent to have fun too. But B, that will encourage them to play a lot of free people's cards during their turn. Yes, the Warg Riders with the Wargs can be expensive, but because our opponent is going to have a better hand, they may have more opportunity to give you more Twilight too. So I think the 2 sides of this deck support each other in resource management. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Ben, for tuning in. People, check out his channel for a lot more Lord of the Rings stuff, some long form stuff there, and really great content. So we'll see everybody next time.